All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome to our AMA. We're getting ready for launch, so super excited. The team has been crazy busy, and we're excited for you to join us today. I'm here with our CTO, Will Carter. We are here to just give a couple of updates on the ongoing Betanet rollout and upcoming launch of the LAMINA1 Hub. And I just dropped in the chat feed. Obviously, we've got a lot of questions that have started kind of bubbling and percolating around. And so if anyone has any questions that they want to ask live to Will or I during the session, feel free to drop them in the chat now as we go through the preamble and all of that stuff. And I'll try to get them answered at the end of the session. So basically, yeah, the topic of today's AMA, Betanet onboarding begins. So this is the second of two updates we've had scheduled since we had originally pushed Betanet live early last week. So last time we talked, Will was on alone. They just pushed the Genesis block live, initiated early performance testing, and we're putting the final touches on the LAMINA1 Hub. This week, just to track where we're at, we onboarded the LAMINA1 Early Access Program and our first cohort of Betanet Validators to the chain. These validators also got access to the LAMINA1 Hub, which is our new onboarding platform and sort of test bed for Betanet, where we're going to be starting up beta testing with the entire community on Monday, August 14th, so just a couple of days away. Right now, I just want to give a shout out to all of the validators and community members and early access partners who have tested the platform so far. We've had basically about I'd say 150 to 200 early testers who have been poking tons of holes through the documentation and informing me of rogue spaces in the code sets, all of that stuff. Thank you all so much for flagging it. That's why we do this. Obviously, we're still in Betanet. This is a test environment, and all of this feedback is being rapidly chronicled and addressed and looked at by our team. So again, thank you all so much, and thank you for being our early guinea pigs to those who have started testing. And yeah, like last week, this is going to be a pretty quick update. I'm going to ask Will a couple of questions just about the upcoming launch. We'll talk a little bit about the sort of selection process for validators. Got a lot of questions about the community around that this week, as well as a little overview on what to expect next week. So again, here with our CTO, Will Carter, and I'm just going to kick off with a question from me before we dive into community questions, which is, Will, what's the latest on beta? Any progress updates since last week? And how are you feeling about the new chain and early rollout so far?
Good question. Hello, everyone. Good to see you all again. Beta's going great. We did actually run into one or two bugs, which I'll talk about a little bit later in the AMA, but everything's relatively stable, moving smoothly. The hub is looking great. Keeping in mind that it is the first phase of many phases over the coming weeks that you guys will start seeing more and more functionality out of. But currently everything's running smoothly and we're excited for you to jump in. Testing's been going good. Rollout to the validators, as Casey just mentioned, has just begun. And so far, I believe the feedback we've gotten has been pretty positive. So yeah, everything's on track and getting ready for you guys on Monday.
Awesome. And yeah, I mean, so from your end, Will, what can the L1 community expect next week when Betanet and the LAMINA1 Hub rolls out? What are some of the things that L1 engineering in particular is going to be kicking off people on wanting to test and poke around in?
Yeah, so Betanet's going to roll out with, and I think I mentioned this in last week's AMA, where Betanet's really going to be more about building out user-facing functionality and experiences for you guys to actually touch and use. The first phase of LAMINA1 Hub is going to be around onboarding generally. So, rethinking what it means to onboard and jump into a Web3 environment for the first time. And so I think what we want you to do is test out that onboarding experience. Specifically, we're really valuing your feedback if relatively new to Web3. And I think that's like the primary thing. So, how easy is it for you to sign up to the hub, get a wallet address, and then start transacting? That's what we want to really nail down in this first phase of the hub. Subsequent phases of the hub will be about, establishing an identity that'll be public and shareable. And then, once we have that identity and we're easily able to, bring new mainstream users into the fold, what are some things that you can now do? Can you, trade assets? Can you jump into experiences? So that's all going to be stuff that we're rolling out over the following months. But on day one, it's going to be, give us your feedback on how easy it is to enter the hub, sign into the hub, create a new account, and then send and receive L1 cryptocurrency.
Great. We got a question from Unreal Robin, which Unreal, I'm hoping you're an Unreal developer. That'd be rad. But they're asking, is it possible to build stuff with LAMINA1 already, even just like beta for testing? And just like in general, I know, testnet was a lot of just, very early kind of like wallet testing transactions. We had a little bit of NFT playground stuff, but what does the transition really from testnet to betanet mean for builders moving forward? Are there going to be opportunities for metaverse builders to begin sort of like putting their experiences up on LAMINA1 moving forward?
Yeah, definitely. So can you technically start building stuff with LAMINA1 already? Yes. The official Unity SDK we've been building in-house, I don't think we'll be supporting on Betanet for just a couple weeks after launch. So once that's available, you can go ahead and start using that to develop experiences. We are kind of putting the finishing touches on some of our partner integrations, who have like more robust and rich development and kind of game engines that you can start using if you're looking for something that's a little more plug and play and feature complete. So those will be ready soon after, if not at the same time as our internal SDKs. But in general, and we're also working on some tooling that'll make it easier for you to launch subnets if that's something that you're interested in doing. And then, of course, if you're more along the lines of like artistic creators or people who are interested in launching NFTs, that's something you can do more or less right away if you already have a little bit of experience in building and deploying the smart contracts. But I think this isn't something that's immediate term, but a little bit further down the roadmap, we're hoping to build out some tools that'll make that a much more intuitive, almost no-code process for creators. But yeah, so that's kind of what it's going to look like on day one. If you're building smart contracts and NFTs, you can deploy them right away. And then if you're looking to develop with game engines, those will be, 2 to 3 weeks, I think, post public launch.
Awesome. And we got a question from Muhammadar, and then I also see Jackal Girl is asking questions around, will Betanet testers get any rewards? And Jackal Girls, can you please review how people will be earning Betanet L1 tokens? So sort of similar. So will Betanet testers get any rewards? So along with the launch of the hub and Betanet publicly on Monday 14th, we will be re-kicking off our quest system. It'll work the same way as it did during testnet, which is we're going to be rolling out sort of a weekly challenges or regular challenges along with sort of new features and functionalities we ship. Those quests will be related to those new features, functionalities, education initiatives, etc. You'll earn points, and those will sort of track towards, eventual engagement, early access, incentivization stuff. The question around how people will actually be receiving and earning L1 Betanet tokens. So on August 14th as well, along with the hub launch, we haven't posted it yet, so validators can't get access to it now, but there will be a Betanet faucet where you'll be able to get some initial tokens just to help you out with testing and transactions. That faucet will live on Discord. We'll have a designated channel for it. It should be really easy to get access to those coins. And then we do have a community event coming up where people will probably get some more tokens, and that's all I'm going to say about that. So, yes, we will be facilitating token drops via faucet and a question mark mystery event coming up soon. So, next, I want to run through a few questions from our noderunner community. So, as I sort of mentioned before, this week we sent out about 100 early invites to people who applied to validate for Betanet for us. Alongside that, though, we also sent about 200 sorry you were not selected messages out to folks who applied. So, got a bunch of questions around, what that application and review process was like, whether or not, those applications are rolling, all of that stuff. And so I wanted to address. So I guess to start, Will, I just wanted to ask, we've gotten a ton of questions, but why have an application to run validators for Betanet in the first place? And what were you looking for when you were making your selections?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and it's one, we could spend 30 minutes digging into, so I'll be a bit brief. But at a high level, there's a handful of things, reasons why we have an application. One of them is simply resources. So I know a lot of the validators early on when we put out our initial request, either had no experience running validators. Some of them had no experience, operating Unix or Linux machines in general. And that's not necessarily, a blocking issue, but it is a resourcing issue in that we want to make sure that the people who are running validators are doing it correctly. And to do that, we either need to walk you guys through that process and support you, and that's much harder to do if you don't have, some basic experience or skills. Or we need to facilitate and build an internal community of validators who could help us out with that process. So who could help new validators who come into the community on board. And so that's kind of what we've been doing, is trying to handpick and seed a community of experienced validators who, once that's been established, they'll be able to help kind of less experienced validators come into the fold. There are other reasons as well. Early blockchain networks are kind of inherently fragile. So if you don't gradually build them up with trusted's maybe the wrong word, but reliable infrastructure, bugs can happen, bad things can happen. And this is actually, one of the issues that I mentioned earlier. One of the bugs we found early on in Betanet was, generally when we build these applications, we're looking for geographic distribution. We're looking for platform distribution in terms of clouds. So we don't want all of our nodes like on Hetzner or all of our nodes on Azure or AWS. We want a good distribution of them. Because you run into issues. So if it's geographic, if you have a bunch of nodes, clustered in a geographic region and they something happens, either politically or there's a natural disaster or something, and those validators are shut off, you end up with real issues in the network. And that's something we want to prevent, especially early on when there aren't that many validators. And one of the bugs we ran into last week, or maybe it was early this week, it turns out that Google Cloud just decided that they were going to block a bunch of Hetzner IP ranges because someone had launched some attacks on Google from those IP ranges. And we had a bunch of Hetzner nodes that weren't talking to the Google Cloud nodes. So this is kind of why, early on, it really makes a big difference when a handful of nodes go offline. And so we want to make sure that we grow the validator community, in a very careful and managed way. And then obviously once the network is a little more stable and larger, we can open it up to anyone who wants to join.
Awesome. Yeah, that's a lot more eloquent than what I've been kind of telling people in the chat, but basically, yeah, we've had a lot of people who've been like, I think I met all of the criteria that you had, right? Like prior experience, like, you know, a website that we could check out their prior node operations. But in general, yeah, we got a lot of applicants from Europe and the United States. And so we had to be a little bit picky this time around. I think in general though, the applications are rolling, right? Like, so we're keeping this list and can you share a little bit of info just about like how we'll be growing like alongside our validators, like what the plan is around that? Should people reapply or should people, you know, keep their applications in?
Yeah, this isn't, if you got sorry you weren't selected email, that doesn't mean you can't become a validator. Either there's two ways to become a validator. You can become what we call a partner validator, or you can be, a grassroots community validator. And the only real difference there is whether or not we, number one, subsidize the staking requirement for your validator, and number two, whether or not, you have a more or less direct line of support with the team. So for the partner validators, the ones we've been handpicking, if you did get a sorry you weren't selected email, that doesn't mean you won't get one in the future. It is a rolling application process, and as the network becomes more and more, or as we onboard more and more of the ones that were invited, and they jump online, and we get a little bit more bandwidth to support more, we will select more. And then, if you want to be a community validator, if you weren't selected, then that's certainly possible. And I think, some of those events that Casey hinted at earlier on in the call, will facilitate your ability to, basically stake yourself and become a validator, whether or not we invited you. But the key thing to realize there is you may not have a direct line of communication with us to help you get things set up correctly. We'll do our best, obviously. We're not going to, let our community flounder, but we may not be as responsive as you're hoping, or you may need to rely on other community members to help you get set up. I think the instructions for getting set up are fairly straightforward and simple if you have any experience with Linux or Unix. So I'm not expecting a whole lot of issues there, but just keep that in mind. That direct support will be fairly limited.
And if the directions are confusing to you, let me know, because I'm going to be updating the docs for everyone's feedback as well. So a couple extra questions. So a lot of questions from current validators. Should we spin down the nodes we're currently running for testnet? Will, do you still need folks running testnet nodes?
Yeah, so I know we're going to be continuing to operate our nodes again for at least another week, but I think it's safe for all of the community members who are operating testnet nodes to shut them down at this stage. So yeah, I'd recommend you guys go ahead and do that, save yourself some operating costs, and just focus on getting ready for Betanet.
Great. I also have a lot of questions from around that location thing. So I know you talked about the importance of decentralization and stuff. We've got a number of node operators. I see you F5 nodes basically saying like, hey, I applied from Europe, but we actually have nodes all around the world. So like if I move my location, will it make it like more like likely for me to be selected to validate? I also have a bunch of people asking me like, hey, I'm in Europe or I'm in the United States, and like I could easily just like set a VPN and like move my node location. Like, will that make it more likely? Probably one of the most common questions we're getting. So Will, do you want to help answer that a little bit?
Yeah, and this is something we tried to be fairly careful about. There is a difference between, who you are as like an individual and where your node is operated, and we take both into consideration. For one, we do take into consideration who you are and like what your citizenship is for a number of reasons. We do want kind of broad cultural diversity within the validator community as well. Currently, I think by far our most, popular or most in-demand region is Eastern Europe in general. And so while, we are obviously selecting individuals from Eastern Europe, it means that you're in a more competitive pool, at least for, partner validation. So if you are in Eastern Europe, it will be more challenging to be accepted just because there's so much demand from that region, and we want to make sure that we get representation from some of the other geographic regions out there as well. And then obviously, node location is incredibly important, and we want broad geographic distribution for, latency issues or latency considerations, as well as kind of that robustness I talked about earlier on. We want to make sure that our validators aren't in countries that have regulatory issues around operating blockchain infrastructure, or, that they're not all co-located in a country that that might lead to issues if those restrictions were introduced.
Yeah, I think in general, I've been encouraging folks, like, if you've got multiple locations for your company, or if for some reason you filled out your application and you realize that you didn't really fill the information in right, or that you've got more experience, like, resubmit your application. We're going to be reviewing them regularly. And again, the criteria will get less strict as the network expands. So yeah. Jeffurol asks, will node operators be able to name their nodes or provide some sort of like ethos or description around that in the future? Do we know that?
Yeah, it's something we've thought about, and definitely something that I think is important to the network and the entire concept of delegated proof of stake. So it's something I definitely want to implement and provide. We do have to balance it against a couple of roadmap considerations and resourcing restrictions, obviously. So currently, I think we're really focusing on the users at the moment, and making sure that we have some compelling, tools and content for them to begin using. But that's certainly something I would like to implement and provide to you guys for sure.
Awesome. Alchemist 19, you ask, is Betanet practically a UX UI test? And I feel like my answer is like, yeah, we're testing and building this whole thing together. Like, that's the whole point. So yes, we will be doing a lot of like UX UI testing, targeted stuff. Elena, who I know you guys all know really well from the server, will be spearheading a bunch of those efforts. And then you also asked, are we getting a Betanet badge on Monday? Hell yeah, we're getting a Betanet badge on Monday. So that'll be rolling out as one of our first quests. Alchemist 6, you're asking, can we talk about subnets? I want to do an entire AMA about subnets when we release subnet functionality more specifically. So I'm going to save that. But yes, we should really deep dive about subnets soon. And let's see. Okay. I think that's all the questions that we got. Thank you all so much for joining us. I know it's been a little quiet this week. I'm sure you guys can imagine we are all cylinders firing, trying to get ready for this launch on Monday. Again, we're going to be onboarding the entire community under the Hub and Betanet on Monday, relaunching Zeely Quest, and beginning our first round of community feedback and testing. In the meantime, I'm going to be spending the whole weekend changing over all of our server channels from testnet to Betanet. So if you see some server changes today and tomorrow, that's me hard at work, pushing the transition and also putting the final touches on our community onboarding materials and Betanet documentation, making sure that all of those bugs that everyone has very helpfully flagged are not there when we launch on Monday. So also, just as a flag, next week, once you guys have had a few days to test things out, we will be hosting an in-depth Hub launch AMA with CEO Rebecca Barkin and Will again on Thursday, not Friday, where we're going to be talking more about kind of like the broad vision for beta and the goals and stuff. So I know we've kind of focused on kind of hardcore tech and validator questions this week. I'm saving some more of the big picture stuff for next week when we have Rebecca on. In the meantime, If you have any questions for us, submit them on the AMA questions channel. We're also going to be launching a designated feedback and question form embedded within the LAMINA1 Hub itself on Monday morning, where you can share your thoughts and ideas with us anytime. That is the best way to provide feedback. Doing it live in the Discord channels, I do my best to scroll through and read the 800 messages a day we receive on Discord, but those forms are the best way to really get that feedback sort of like cataloged and like put into our Jira and our official system. So if you want your voice heard, that's my recommendation moving forward. And I'll stay in the chat a little bit longer to answer some more of the questions that you all are dropping here, but thank you all so much. There's not a secret code for this AMA. You all are just attending from the goodness of your own hearts. So thank you all so much. Thanks, Will, for joining.
Thank you all.
Bye, guys.